What if the healthy rice in your pantry is the one you should fear the most? Because the biggest surprise in the newest rice testing was not the bargain bag on the bottom shelf. It was the premium, organic, and family-trusted names people buy without thinking. If you want clear, hard-hitting breakdowns like this that can actually change what ends up on your dinner table, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Share it with the person in your family who does the grocery run. Rice feeds billions of people. It is comfort food. It is survival food. It is culture. For a lot of families, it shows up every single day, sometimes twice a day, and nobody looks at a bowl of rice and thinks danger. That is exactly why this story matters. Because the problem is not one dramatic moment. The problem is repetition. A little exposure over and over, week after week, year after year. And when recent testing looked at rice sold across the United States, the results were ugly. Healthy babies. Bright Futures tested 145 rice samples from stores around the country and found arsenic in every single one. More than 1 in 4 samples went above the FDA action level used for infant rice cereal. Consumer Reports found the same pattern in its own testing too, with inorganic arsenic in every sample it checked. They also found cadmium and mercury across the board and lead in many products. That does not mean every spoonful is a disaster. It means rice is one of those foods where the pattern matters more than the moment. And there is one detail most shoppers never hear. The FDA has an action level for inorganic arsenic in infant rice cereal. But there is no matching federal limit for the regular bags and boxes of rice families eat at home. So a product can be sold for family dinner even when the numbers would raise alarms in the baby food aisle. Why does rice keep showing up in stories like this? Because rice is unusually good at pulling arsenic out of flooded soil and water. It absorbs more of it than most other grains. Brown rice usually carries more because the outer layers stay on. Rice grown in parts of the southern United States often tests higher. Rice from California, India, and Thailand tends to test lower. So the brand matters, but the real story hiding behind the brand is often where the rice came from and how it was processed. That means this is not just a shopping story, it is a system story. It is a farming story, a labeling story, a trust story. Families were taught to judge food by price, reputation, and buzzwords. But with rice, the better question is much simpler. Where was it grown? What type is it? Was it processed heavily? And is the brand giving you real information or just a feeling? So tonight, we are doing this the smart way. Not with panic, not with fake drama. We are going through 13 rice brands or rice-based products that deserve the most caution. Then we will end with the 6 better picks that actually give families a safer lane. Let's start with the brands that sound old, wholesome, and trustworthy. Carolina Gold has history, prestige, and that premium image people love. It sounds like a better rice before you even open the bag. But recent reporting on rice contamination points to a hard truth. Rice from the southeast, including the Carolinas, has long been tied to higher arsenic risk because of the soil and farming legacy in that region. That matters because many shoppers hear heritage and assume clean. Those are not the same thing. If you are feeding young kids, eating rice often, or already trying to lower long-term exposure, Carolina Gold is a label that can trick you. It can trick you into feeling safe when the sourcing itself should make you slow down. Then there is Riceland, a name many people may not even notice because it shows up quietly through retail supply chains and food service. That makes it more important, not less. Big suppliers shape what millions of people eat without building the kind of brand awareness that makes shoppers ask questions. Recent concerns around U.S.-grown long-grain rice from high-risk regions put brands like this under a harsher light. When rice comes from areas that have repeatedly tested higher for inorganic arsenic, consumers deserve more transparency. They deserve more than a familiar bag and a low price. If a brand is huge, but tells you very little that is clear about sourcing and testing, that is not reassuring. That is a warning sign dressed up as normal. Cajun Country is another one that leans hard on tradition. The branding feels local, proud, and rooted. But Louisiana rice has been tied for years to higher arsenic concern. Part of that story is geography. Part of it is the long agricultural history of the region. The result is that shoppers can end up buying nostalgia when what they really need is data. And that is a theme you need to keep in your head through this whole video. The package can sell you identity. It can sell you culture. It can sell you trust. None of that lowers heavy metals. If the rice is coming from a region that has repeatedly raised red flags, the branding means nothing. Now let us talk about a label that many health-conscious people trust almost automatically. Whole Foods 365. That trust is exactly why this one hits harder. People walk into Whole Foods expecting better sourcing, better standards, and better oversight. But testing and reporting around rice have shown something important. Expensive does not automatically mean cleaner. Better for you marketing does not change with the soil put inside the grain. Brown rice is where this becomes especially uncomfortable because brown rice is often sold as the smarter choice. More fiber, more nutrients, lower glycemic impact. All true. But it also usually carries more arsenic than white rice of the same type because the outer layer stays intact. So if you bought premium store brand brown rice thinking you were doing the best thing for your body, you may have been trading benefits for risk. You were never told to think about the contamination downside. Kroger's simple truth. Organic line makes the same promise in a different language. Green label, organic promise, safer vibe. But organic does not mean the ground was free of arsenic. It mainly tells you something about farming inputs, not what has been sitting in the soil or water for decades. That is one of the biggest traps in this whole story. People see organic and mentally replace it with clean. That leap is emotionally understandable but scientifically shaky. If the rice still comes from a higher risk source, the organic badge can become more of a comfort blanket than a real protection. Minute rice needs a separate kind of caution. On paper, fast rice can look better because some tests show lower inorganic arsenic levels after processing. But convenience creates another concern. High heat processing can change arsenic chemistry. It may increase especially toxic arsenic forms in some rice products. That means the quick cook promise is not the same as a clean bill of health. And even if the exact chemistry goes over the average shopper's head, the bigger point is simple. The more industrially processed the rice product is, the more careful you should be before calling it safer. This is where the story starts to get more personal, because baby food is where families lower their guard the most. If a brand is marketed for infants, most parents assume the safety bar must be incredibly high. But recent years have shattered that illusion. Earth's Best Rice Cereal is one of those names that sounds designed to stop worry. Yet the broader baby food heavy metal story has shown why that is dangerous. The comforting name on the box is not proof of low contamination, and with rice cereal, the problem is even more serious because babies are smaller and developing faster. They are more vulnerable to neurological harm from repeated exposure, and that is what makes this so emotionally frustrating. Parents are usually trying the hardest when they buy products like this. They are not cutting corners, they are not being reckless, they are buying the item that looks the most responsible. But when the base ingredient is rice, the brand still has to prove it earned your trust. It does not get that trust for free just because the packaging uses soft colors and words like organic, gentle, or best. Quick checkpoint. If this video is saving you hours of research, tap subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment. Tell me the rice brand sitting in your kitchen right now. I want to see what people are actually buying. Now we move into brands that matter because they live in specific communities and specific routines. Goya is huge in households where rice is not an occasional side. It is part of the rhythm of the home. That matters, because risk rises when a food is eaten often. The latest heavy metal reporting around rice makes frequency just as important as contamination level. A product that is only somewhat worse becomes a much bigger deal when it shows up on the table constantly. That is why brands with deep cultural reach carry deeper responsibility. If a company serves families that rely on rice several times a week, it should be leading on transparency, testing, and sourcing. Anything less is not good enough. Rice Krispies is a different kind of shock because it reminds us that the rice problem does not end in the rice aisle. Some of the most familiar rice-based foods are sitting in breakfast bowls, lunchboxes, and snack cabinets. Once rice is turned into a processed cereal, parents stop thinking about the original grain. But the source still matters. The processing still matters. And if recent research has taught consumers anything, it is that a kid-friendly mascot does not erase contamination concerns. They just make them easier to miss. Rice Select is one of the most premium-looking brands on shelves. Clear container, polished presentation, upscale feel. It is the kind of product people buy when they want to feel like they are choosing quality without going fully luxury. That image is powerful, but image is not chemistry. Recent discussions around arsenic in rice have repeatedly exposed the gap between premium marketing and actual contamination risk. Some of the most polished products on the shelf are still built on rice types or source regions that do not deserve blind trust. That is why this video is not about cheap versus expensive. It is about tested patterns versus marketing theater. Mahatma matters because it is one of the most familiar rice names in America. And when a trusted national brand gets hit with legal claims over undisclosed heavy metals, people should pay attention. A 2025 lawsuit claimed Mahatma Brown whole grain rice contained arsenic and cadmium, and that consumers were not properly warned. Now, a lawsuit is not the same thing as a final judgment. That matters. But the existence of the claim still tells you something important. The rice contamination issue has moved beyond lab reports. It has moved into public legal conflict. When a company benefits from an image like America's favorite rice, the standard should be higher, not lower. Familiarity is not innocence. Sometimes it just means the problem reached more homes before people started asking questions. Signature Select, the store brand tied to Safeway and Albertsons, belongs on the caution list for a different reason. Cheap rice creates a comforting illusion of practicality. It feels efficient. It feels smart. But if low price comes with worse sourcing or worse contamination outcomes, the savings become fake. You are not beating the system. You are just accepting lower standards at the exact moment your family needs higher ones. The tragedy of cheap food is that it often punishes the people with the fewest options. When safer rice costs more, a bad budget brand can quietly become the default for families who never got access to better choices. Ben's Original, formerly Uncle Ben's, may be the clearest example of how long a famous brand can live on borrowed trust. It is one of the most recognized names in rice anywhere. People assume a giant legacy brand must be heavily tested, tightly managed, and too established to mess around. But brand size is not the same as product purity. In fact, large legacy brands often benefit the most from consumer autopilot. People stop reading, stop comparing, stop questioning. They buy the name they grew up with. That is why a famous brand can stay in millions of kitchens while public skepticism rises. And there are two more names that matter because they show how this issue reaches beyond the rice bag itself. First is First Street. HBBF 2025 testing flagged First Street long grain brown rice among the samples with especially high arsenic. It was around double the FDA action level used for infant rice cereal. That is not a small miss. That is the kind of result that should wake shoppers up fast, especially those who assumed generic store rice was harmless. Second is Rouse's Market brown rice long grain. It also showed up among the highest inorganic arsenic results in the report. That matters because it reinforces the same pattern again and again: brown rice and southern sourcing. It shows limited shopper awareness and a contamination burden that many people would never guess from the packaging. So there are your 13 names to treat with serious caution: Carolina Gold, Riceland, Cajun Country, and Whole Foods 365. Kroger, Simple Truth Organic, Minute Rice, Earth's Best, Goya, Rice Krispies, Rice Select, Mahatma, Signature Select, and Ben's Original. The especially alarming brown rice results tied to First Street and Rouse's Market should be proof that the pattern is real. That shape becomes even clearer when you look at what the worst performing products had in common. Some were brown rice, some were grown in the Southeast, some were highly processed, some leaned heavily on healthy branding, some were just cheap and quiet enough to escape attention. Different labels, same warning system. And I want to stop here for a second and make something clear. This is not a never eat rice again video. That would be stupid, unrealistic, and probably impossible for a lot of people watching. Rice is affordable, filling, cultural, and deeply practical. The goal is not fear. The goal is smarter repetition. If you eat rice once in a while, the risk picture is different. If rice is a staple, brand and type matter much more. If you have babies, small kids, or you are pregnant, the margin for care should be even higher. So what patterns should you remember from the avoid side? 1. Brown rice usually carries more arsenic than white rice from the same category. 2. Rice from the southeastern United States tends to come with more concern than rice from California, India, or Thailand. 3. Organic labels do not guarantee low heavy metals. 4. Baby products and processed rice foods are not automatically safer. And 5. Trust built by history, branding, or price is not the same as trust earned by clean sourcing and testing. That brings us to the better part of this story, because the testing did not just expose bad patterns. It also pointed towards safer ones, and this is what most people actually need, not panic, a way out. Trader Joe's is one of the better options when you are buying basmati rice sourced from India. That sourcing matters. Indian basmati has repeatedly shown up as a lower arsenic choice compared with U.S. long grain rice. And that is a powerful reminder that the words you should care about are often the smallest ones on the bag. Not the logo, not the lifestyle photography, not the trendy design, the origin. If the bag clearly tells you the rice is basmati from India, that is already a much stronger signal than vague branding. Three Ladies is a solid pick for jasmine rice, especially because Thai jasmine has been a better performing category. This is where community trust and testing patterns actually line up. Families who cook jasmine rice all the time do not just need something that tastes right. They need safety. They need something that lowers the long-term trade-off. And Thai jasmine has consistently been one of the better lanes. Nishiki is one of the most useful safer picks because it highlights California-grown rice, especially medium grain and sushi-style rice. California keeps showing up as a better source region. Not perfect, better. That distinction matters. There is no magic rice with zero contamination risk, but California rice makes a lot of sense for frequent cooks. Royal Authentic is another good example of why origin beats image. Indian basmati has consistently ranked better. When a brand aligns with the lower risk pattern instead of fighting it, consumers win. You do not need the bag to promise you spiritual wellness. You need it to come from a place that keeps testing lower. Lotus Foods stands out because it built a whole identity around sourcing and farming philosophy. It lines up more closely with the safer categories people should actually be looking for. Rice from Asian sources simply gives you a better chance of lowering exposure than blindly buying long-grain brown rice. And then there's Lundberg Family Farms, which proves a point many shoppers assume is impossible. Even brown rice can look much better when it is grown in California and sourced with more care. That matters because a lot of people do not want to give up brown rice. They want the fiber and the taste. California-grown options like Lundberg give you a much better lane than the brown rice from higher-risk southern states. Here is the deeper lesson hiding inside those 6 safer picks. None of them are safe because they have magical branding. They are safer because they line up with the patterns the data keeps repeating. California-grown rice, Thai jasmine, Indian basmati. Clearer sourcing, better odds. That is what smart shopping looks like when the food industry makes things confusing on purpose. And if you have stayed with me this far, you are not a passive viewer. You are exactly who this channel is for. So subscribe, share this with your family group chat, and comment rice list if you want a printable guide. But there is one more piece most grocery videos leave out, and honestly, it may be the most useful thing in the story. Even if your brand is not ideal, the way you cook rice can still change the risk. Healthy Babies, Bright Futures says cooking rice like pasta can cut arsenic significantly, in some cases up to about 60%. That means boiling rice in extra water and draining it, instead of using the exact absorption method many people grew up with. If you soak it first and then cook it in excess water, that can help too. Rinsing alone is not enough. This is huge because it means families do not have to wait for regulators or brands to save them. A simple kitchen habit can lower exposure right now. The second move is rotation. Quinoa, barley, couscous, farro, bulgur, and other grains tested much lower on average than rice. In fact, HBBF found alternative grains carried about 69% less heavy metal contamination than rice overall. That does not mean you need to turn your home into a quinoa monastery. It just means swapping out a few meals. You're breaking the repetition that makes the exposure story worse. The third move is choosing your type carefully. If you love rice, white basmati from India, Thai jasmine, and California-grown rice are the strongest starting points. That does not mean you stop thinking. It means you stop pretending all rice is basically the same. It is not. Origin changes the risk, type changes the risk, processing changes the risk. And the fourth move is the one most people underestimate. Stop rewarding vague packaging. If a brand does not clearly tell you the origin or gives you a generic health claim instead of sourcing, be careful. The more specific the origin, the easier it is for you to apply what the testing actually suggests. California, India, and Thailand. Those words matter more than organic, simple, natural, or family trusted. There's also a quiet emotional side to this story that I do not want to skip. Food is memory. Food is family. Food is identity. Telling people to question a staple can feel almost insulting. But protecting a tradition does not mean refusing new information. It means adapting, so the tradition can continue without unnecessary harm. The goal is not to scare people. The goal is to make those foods safer in the real world we actually live in. That is why I get frustrated when companies hide behind image. A parent in a grocery store does not have a lab. A grandparent buying for the family does not have time to study scientific papers. Most people are making fast decisions in fluorescent light with a cart full of other problems. The burden should not be entirely on the consumer to decode risk from vague packaging, but that is where it lands. So let us put everything into one clean takeaway list you can actually remember the next time you shop. If you want to be cautious, the brands that deserve the most side-eye include Carolina Gold, Riceland and Cajun Country, Whole Foods, 365 and Kroger Simple. Truth, Brown Rice, Minute Rice, Earth's Best, Goya, and Rice Krispies also make the list. Watch out for Rice Select, Mahatma, Signature Select, and Ben's Original, plus First Street and Rouse's Market brown rice. If you want the better lanes, focus on Trader Joe's Indian Basmati and Three Ladies Thai Jasmine. Nishiki, California. Grown rice, Royal Authentic Indian Basmati, and Lotus Foods varieties are also better choices. Lundberg, California rice is excellent, especially if you want a cleaner brown rice option. Again, safer does not mean perfect. It means safer relative to the rest. And if you remember nothing else after this video, remember this. The most dangerous thing about food contamination is not always the contamination itself. It is the illusion of safety. The illusion that a famous label would never risk your health, or that organic always means clean. The illusion that expensive means tested, or that if something is sold to families, someone made sure it is fine. Sometimes nobody did. Sometimes the only reason you find out is because an independent group pays for testing, or journalists follow the story, or lawsuits drag the issue into daylight. And by then, millions of people have already eaten the product for years. That is why this topic matters so much. Not because rice is evil or your pantry is poison, but because everyday foods deserve everyday scrutiny. What we eat on autopilot shapes our lives. So no, you do not need to throw out every grain of rice in your house tonight. But you should stop buying on autopilot. Read the origin, choose lower risk types, rotate with other grains, cook rice in extra water and drain it. Be extra careful with babies and toddlers. And if a brand survives mostly on old trust and vague marketing, stop giving it the benefit of the doubt. Because the real story here is not just about rice. It is about how easy it is to sell comfort in a bag. It is about how easy it is to confuse tradition with safety. It is about how easy it is for a family staple to become a long-term risk simply because nobody questioned it. Now you do. And once you know that the bowl on the table may be carrying more than dinner, you have a choice. Keep eating on habit or start eating with intention. One choice keeps the system exactly as it is. The other tells brands, stores, and regulators that families are finally paying attention. And when that happens, the bag in your pantry stops being a passive purchase. It becomes a vote.